Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be going through the Paragon Active Assurance Swagger API Browser Learning Byte. All right, so here is our example, and here we have a topology where we have two test agents connecting into one control center. And they are doing that through their ETH0 interface, and then with their ETH1 interface, they are connecting into the service provider network. And okay, so what are we going to do here? We're going to use the Swagger API browser, which uses REST APIs, and we're going to find a resource that lists test agents, and then we're going to execute that resource and see what we get. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get this started. All right, so here is the dashboard for Control Center with Paragon Active Assurance. And one thing we want to do is we want to open a new tab, and we want to, well, before I do that, let's go ahead and just talk about the URL. To get to the REST API browser, that is the Swagger API browser, we need to use this URL and then put /rest at the end of it. So I'm going to open a new tab. And so this is just the URL of the control center. Put REST, and that brings up the Swagger API browser. And in here, you'll see a bunch of different resources for the REST API. And they have different categories like alarm email, alarm template. And recall that we're looking for something to do with test agents. So let's keep scrolling. There's some test agents resources. If we scroll down, and we'll see that in just a second, and here we go, test agent. Great. So the first one we see here is a get method that lists test agents. That sounds kind of like what we want to do because we do want to list the test agents. Okay, great. So we click on that, it expands it, and we get some information. We get more details. We can click on this to find out more details about this resource. And we have the option to try it out. And this is actually really cool because with the try it out, you can kind of figure out, is this what I want before I build a script and spend all the time doing that and then find out later it's not what I want. So the try it out is really, really useful here. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's click try it out. And we're presented with some parameters we need to enter. And with that, we have three different parameters. We have the account, limit, offset. It gives you a little bit of information, such as the description here says the account to perform the action on, how many elements should be returned, from which element list should be returned. And so with that, the only thing that's required is the account name. Now you might wonder to yourself, well, what is the account name? And the quick and easy way to figure this out is to go back to the Control Center dashboard, and you'll see the account name right after the URL. And so if we select that, just copy that over, and then let's go ahead and click execute. Let's see what happens. And we scroll down. Oh, we get an error. Look at this. Type error, network error while attempting to fetch resource. Now that's kind of maybe a little difficult to figure out, but this just tells us it can't reach the resource. And if you look at the command it used, because it just runs a curl command to get the resource, you can see here that this URL, this IP address that we have here, is not correct. If you look up here, we have 172.25.11.11, and here it's way different. And that can happen if you were to change the actual IP address that is associated with the control center later after setting it up. And that's actually what I did here. So the way to fix that is to jump to the CLI of the control center, and there's a file in there that we can change that site IP address. And so one other thing I want to point out before we jump to the CLI, if we scroll up, we can see that the base URL is also that incorrect address. So we could have seen that first before we scrolled down and ran some stuff to find out things weren't working. So just keep that in mind. That information is contained right there. And so what we'll do now is we'll jump to the Control Center CLI and make that change. All right, so here is the Control Center CLI, and the file we need to edit. Go sudo nano /etc/netrounds, then restl.conf. You can see in here the site URL is set to that incorrect address. And so we need to change that to the correct address, save that file, And then we can just jump back to the Swagger API browser and refresh it, and it will use the correct site URL. So let's go ahead and jump back to that Swagger API browser and try this out. All right, so here is the Swagger API browser again. And you can see that we haven't refreshed the page yet, and we still have that old base URL. Let's go ahead and refresh that and see what we get. And that looks a lot better. We have the new address that matches what we actually are using. And so that looks good. The base URL changed. And so let's go ahead and scroll on down to the test agent resource again, or the resources that are under the test agent category. And we'll expand this. And let's click try it out again. And we should get different result this time. Click execute. And okay, that happened a lot quicker, but look at that. We still have an error, unauthorized. And the reason behind that is if we scroll back up, we can see that this lock is unlocked. We need to lock it to secure it. And the way we do that is with an API token. We haven't created that yet, so let's go ahead and go back and go to the settings and then user profile, API tokens, and then API tokens. And we need to create a new API token. And then it tells us what it is up here. And the one thing to keep in mind here is, as this note says, make sure you save this, as you won't be able to see this later. That's pretty typical for API tokens. And so let's go ahead and copy that. And notice how the account also shows Juniper Education here as well as in the URL. So there's two different areas to get that. Then let's go ahead and go back to the Swagger API browser. We'll enter that token, click authorize, and we see it's authorized now. Now, if we click log out, it's going to unauthorize it. So we don't want to click that. We want to leave it authorized and click the X button to get rid of that window. Okay, you can see here that there's a lock that is locked instead of unlocked. That means it's secured. And so we have the account information already entered. Let's go ahead and click execute one more time here. And you can see here, we got a code 200. That's good. That means it didn't error out. You can see the command it ran with the API token that we're using here. And that is just a curl command that it's running on the control center. And you could run that curl command from any device that has curl and can access the control center using that base URL that we have here. And so that looks pretty good. And so we can see here, we are actually listing our test agents now. See here, we have TA1. And then we scroll down a little further, we can see we have TA2. We also see that other attributes such as it's online. Online equals true. And we could use something like that to create a script to, I don't know, maybe even check to see if a test agent is online. And you can see here that we have TA3 and we should also have TA4. And so, yes, okay, great. So we know that this resource is working and that we use the Swagger API browser to find out that information. And so then you could take this information, this base URL, and also the API token and create a script that then does something useful for you, some sort of automation. So that does bring us to the end of this Learning Byte. In this Learning Byte, we demonstrated how to use the Swagger API browser.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Network's certification program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.